If you've ever wondered how professional musicians can so accurately sight read music on the first try, then you are definitely going to want to check out this video. What's up, everybody? My name is Paddock, and today I am coming to you from my practice studio in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. This practice studio is in a music store, so you might hear some music store sounds in the background. Let's talk about sight reading or just reading music in general. If you want to get a whole lot better at it, first you're going to need to practice it because it's definitely a skill that you get better at the more you practice it. But if you understand the three things that I'm going to tell you today, it's going to make figuring out the mystery of how the music goes together a whole lot easier. Before we dive into the tutorial, I want to talk about a little project I just did with some of my fellow YouTube saxophone teachers. Jamie Anderson from Get Your Sax Together did an arrangement of Caravan and invited a lot of us to play on it, and it turned out super cool. I'm really happy with it. The response has been great, and I want to make sure that all of my YouTube followers check out this video. It's a super cool video, and it involves a lot of saxophone teachers that I'm sure that you will recognize, especially if you like saxophone tutorials. So I will put a link to the video in the description below. Okay, so let's talk about sight reading or just reading music in general. The tips I'm going to give you today will definitely improve your sight reading, but if you understand these things, it's going to make you read music just in general a whole lot better. So the very first thing is the key signature. The key signature tells you more than just what is sharp and what is flat. It is called a key signature because it tells you the key that you're in. So if you are in the key of A, or if your key signature has 3 sharps in it, that is telling you that the song that you're about to play is based in the key of A, so it's going to be using a lot of the A scale. So when you know that, that lets you know what notes are most likely going to be the important notes, which are going to be your chord tones. So that'd be your first, third, and fifth. So in the key of A, that would be your A, C sharp, and E. So if you look at your key signature as the roadmap for the song that you're going to play, and it's going to give you a really good idea of what notes are going to be in that song. Now, when you're playing pop songs, you're mostly going to stay in that key signature, but if you're playing a jazz song, you're going to deviate from that key signature some for sure. But if you know the key signature that you're in, it makes it way easier to figure out and guess which notes are coming next. So if you have 3 sharps in your key signature, that doesn't just mean play F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. That is telling you that you are based in the key of A major or F sharp minor. So you want to make sure that you know your A major scale and your F sharp minor scale and what your first, third, and fifth in those keys are. And it's going to make it a whole lot easier to figure out what notes are coming up and what notes are going to be your important notes. What has been your biggest struggle when it comes to reading music? Leave me a comment below, and if I get a few people asking the same question, I will definitely do a video on it. The second thing you need to understand when it comes to sight reading or just reading music in general is the way that notes are grouped together. So when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the rhythm. So when we're talking about rhythm, usually the notes are going to be grouped together in either 1 beat or 2 beats. So it's not random. It's usually 1 beat or 2 beats. Now this is music, so rules are broken all the time, but the majority of the time you're going to be able to figure out where you are in the measure because of the way the notes are grouped together. So if you look at this A major scale, you can see that they are grouped in 1 beat each. So the A B is beat 1, the C sharp D is beat 2, the E F sharp is beat 3, and the G sharp A is beat 4. So when you look at this measure, you can see that it is divided into 4 beats, and that makes it way easier to keep track of where you are in the measure when you're reading or sight reading music. Now, when you're looking at the scale and you see the 8th notes grouped together, it's pretty easy to figure out, but let's look at it with a much more difficult rhythm. So with this rhythm, you can see we start off with a dotted 8th, 16th, and those are grouped together in 1 beat. Those 2 notes are grouped together in 1 beat, so you know that is beat 1. On beat 2, we have 4 16th notes, and they are grouped together, which is very common because 4 16th notes make up 1 beat. So that is beat 2. Then when we have beat 3, we have a 16th note, an 8th note, and a 16th note. So you could write that as an individual 16th note, an individual eighth note and an individual 16th note, but that would be much more difficult to read. So it is very common to group those together into one beat as opposed to having them as three separate looking notes. And for the fourth beat, we have 3 16th notes and 2 32nd notes. Now this is a very difficult rhythm, and when you're sight reading it, you might not be able to get it perfectly right on the first try, but if you look at this rhythm and you see how it is grouped together, you're going to know that that is beat 4. So even if you miss that rhythm, it's going to be very easy to find your way back in on beat 1, because you'll understand that rhythms are oftentimes grouped together in 1 or 2 beat increments. Now, it is also very, very common to see rhythms grouped together in 2 beat increments. So you'll see 4 eighth notes together, so beats 1 and 2 together, and beats 3 and 4 together. So this is what your A major scale looks like when we group it together in half notes or 2 beats. So you have the A, B, C sharp, and D all grouped together as the first 2 beats, and the E, F sharp, G sharp, and A all grouped together as the last 2 beats. So that is very, very common, and this will help you a lot when it comes to reading more difficult rhythms. If you have 8 eighth notes, it's pretty easy to see how they are grouped together in 2 beat increments, so you're splitting the measure in half. So let's talk about another really common rhythm, and it's going to really bring home the idea of grouping things in 2 beat increments, and that is the dotted quarter note eighth note rhythm. So if you look at this example, you can see that I have dotted quarter note, eighth note, then eighth note, dotted quarter note. So when I write the rhythm like that, it makes it a whole lot easier to read, because you can see that the first 2 notes are the first 2 beats, and the last 2 notes are the second 2 beats. It splits that measure in half and makes it really easy to read. If I were to write that rhythm a different way, with a dotted quarter note and beaming the 2 eighth notes together and then another dotted quarter note, it is much more difficult to read because you can't see the split in the middle of the measure. So you're not thinking about beats 1 and 2 and then beats 3 and 4. So oftentimes you're going to see the rhythm split between beats 1 and 2 and beats 3 and 4. Now, it all depends on what rhythms are going on in that measure. Obviously, if there's something going on between beats 2 and 3 that are not easily split, then you're not going to see that. But it is very common to have your measures split in half, with beats 1 and 2 grouped together in a certain way and beats 3 and 4 grouped together in a certain way. So if you understand the groupings of the rhythms in 1 or 2 beat increments, it's going to make reading music and sight reading music a whole lot easier. If you are a saxophone player who would like to add a whole lot more structure into your practice routine, I'd like to invite you to check out the Scott Paddock Sax School. In the Sax School, I take the guesswork out of what to practice, how to practice, and what to practice next by using a step-by-step teaching method that will definitely take your saxophone playing to the next level. So if you're interested in checking that out, I will put a link in the video description below. So the third tip is that you should be reading about a beat or 2 ahead of what you're playing. I know, that might sound a little bit crazy. You would think that you are playing exactly what you're looking at. But as you get better at reading and sight reading music, you want to be scanning a little bit ahead of what you're playing. That's going to make it so that you are not surprised by what's coming up. You're always going to know what you're playing next, and it's going to be way easier to play everything accurate and correct because you're not looking at from one note to the next. When you're looking from one note to the next, it's very easy to make a lot of mistakes because you can't really see what's coming. Now, I know this concept might sound a little bit crazy, but I'm going to put a phrase up on the screen. So when you saw that phrase, you didn't say THESAXISCOOL. You didn't look at each individual letter. You probably didn't even look at each individual word. You saw it as one thing as soon as it was put up on the screen. That's the same idea as scanning ahead when you're reading music. So you want to use that same concept when it comes to reading music. You don't necessarily want to read each individual note. You want to look at them grouped together, see how the line is moving, and try to be reading a little bit ahead of where you're playing. The more you work on this concept, the easier it gets and the fewer mistakes you will make when it comes to playing and sight reading music. So a quick recap of how to sight read music a whole lot better. Number one, your key signature is telling you way more than what's just sharp and flat. It is telling you what key you're in, and if you know what key you're in, you should also know what your important notes are going to be, which are going to be your chord tones. Two, rhythms are not grouped together randomly. So if you can see how they're grouped together in 1 and 2 beat increments or groupings, it's going to make it way easier to figure out where you are in the measure and to read those rhythms. And three, try to read a little bit ahead of the notes that you're playing. If you follow these 3 tips, your sight reading is going to get a whole lot better, a whole lot faster. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. If you'd like to dive deeper into my saxophone world, please check out the Scott Paddock Sax School.